or go.
Hi everyone, welcome at the AzureDIY Season 3 Episode 6. Today we are actually having Chuang Zhu as a presenter. He is a principal consultant for data and AI at Insight, and we're going to cover the second part out of 2 sessions, which is related to advanced analytics for developers. The first session was actually about ingestion of data into your analytics platform, and this is the second part where we're going to talk to using that ingested data to look at insights. So as mentioned earlier, this is season 3 and we're now at episode 6, which is 18th of March, but we're also going to have a number of other exciting episodes that are still to come. So please make sure you actually register to those. The next one will be on the 25th of March, so next week. So make sure to check which topics you want to attend and sign up for those. We also have a growing LinkedIn community, so feel free to take a snapshot of this one. We post all the content in this community. So we're recording this session, and if you have any questions or if you want to connect with your peers, please feel free to register. We can also drop the link in the chat, because this will be the place where you can find all the information that is shared in these types of webinars. Then some quick housekeeping rules. The first one, as mentioned earlier, this session will be recorded and we will share it on LinkedIn. And feel free to ask questions. You can ask questions in the tool. You can put it on anonymous if you want to. Keep it interactive. Share your questions. If you have need any clarifications on any of the content, make sure to raise them in the Q&A section. Because at the end of this call, Sri will actually picking up some of those questions to ask to Chuang, or we will answer those directly into the chat. So just make sure to drop them there. And then before I hand it over to Chuang, 3 exciting Azure announcements. The first 2 are actually related to Azure SQL Managed Instance, because machine learning services is now generally available on Azure SQL Managed Instance. And we're looking to actually make that GA for all Azure SQL services. So that is the first one. And then the second one, which is currently in public preview, it is long-term retention for Azure SQL Managed Instance. This means that you can retain your database backups beyond the existing 35 days provided by Azure SQL Managed Instance and move that up to 10 years. Obviously very relevant if you want to keep your backups for a longer time. And then the last announcement is dynamic data masking granular permissions for Azure SQL and Azure Synapse Analytics. Also very important for if you want to improve your data security management. With that, I actually going to hand it over to Chuang.
Thanks, Vera. Very exciting announcements coming up, especially in the data space. Pretty exciting. Okay, I'll just share my screen. Okay. Okay. Hi guys, welcome to the ones that were part of part 1, and welcome to all the new members that's joined for this session yourself. So a bit of background about myself. My name is Chuang Zhu. I'm currently a principal consultant in data and integration, working for Insight Enterprises. So essentially I've got 15 years of working background experiences in IT, morely focused around the data engineering and analytics space. I come from a traditional background of Microsoft BI tooling. So, you know, if you think about SSIS, SSAS, and SSRS, and you know, these days I really just work with organizations to essentially modernize their data estate through a lot of assessments and sort of guidance. And then I help customers to adopt to Azure for the data platform and the analytic workloads. So in this session today, as Vera mentioned, we're going to be more focused around insight. So the last session we've gone through an ingestion framework where we load data into Synapse, and then this session itself will do a quick recap. Then we'll jump into data governance, and we'll look at some of the two tools we'll probably focus on from a demonstration standpoint. Obviously, Azure Purview is one of the new tools that's been sort of featured in a lot of the Azure environments. It's around the data governance for Azure. And after that, we'll jump into a PowerBI demo and we'll show how that can link up with your existing Synapse workspaces. Okay, without further ado, last week we created an ingestion framework where we used COVID data as a demonstration. We were able to collect data from OData data sources, various HTTP endpoints to collect time series data, country code data, and also daily reports around confirmed, recovered, and death counts. Essentially, we were able to drive the ingestion pattern through a control framework where a lot of the ingestion is done through parameterized through Azure Data Factory within Synapse Analytics. We landed data into various raw zone. Then we used the Synapse Spark clusters in a notebook fashion to do a bit of simple data wrangling. We were able to put that into a trusted zone where we were able to push it to Synapse Analytics. So today we'll probably focus around the Power BI component, and that's the recap itself. And let's jump into the Azure Purview. Okay. So what is Azure Purview? Essentially, it's reimagining the data governance in the cloud. What it does essentially manage and govern operational, transactional, and analytical data within Azure, and it's cloud native, purposely built to address discovery and compliance needs that's required for a lot of organizations that might have GDPR requirements, for instance. So it's fully managed, serverless, and platform as a service. The main sort of value prop is essentially you'll eliminate manual, ad hoc, and homegrown solutions where you need to sort of connect and do a lot of manual data entry. The pure aim of the Azure Purview is to enable a comprehensive data governance journey within the Azure platform itself. So to establish the foundations for effective data governance within Azure, some of the features that come straight out of the box with Azure Purview is automatic discovery of your data sources and data assets. So currently there are numerous connectors of data sources, for example, Data Lake, SQL Server, on-prem, and also Synapse Analytics. As the sort of timeline grows, more of the connectors will become more available, which I'll sort of showcase in the demonstration after this. So the aim is obviously connect all the data that you have within Azure across a hybrid environment as well. The ability to actually scan these data sources to ensure any changes within these source systems are automatically captured. So whether that be new columns, new tables, new clusters that you've created, it's registered and automatically refreshed and updated within Azure Purview. So essentially, once the data is scanned in Purview, it also provides classification across your data. So there are over 100 pre-built classification labels in which you can enable or disable. You can also build custom classification rules. It essentially allows you to sample the data assets, and then it automatically detects specific content of the data assets to provide business users with more context, right? And then the last part is also, once the data is registered, it also provides a data lineage capability. So if you were to sort of do some transformation or movement of data within on-prem or Azure environment, it will actually trace that from the source to the target itself. So why is Azure Purview important? Because it's obviously maximizes the business value of your data. It really provides a bridge between business users and technical users. It has features of a business glossary. So for a lot of business users, they will be able to import, pre-existing glossaries and flat files, and it allows them to define various domain terms. So it's quite useful as well. So for example, if I have a KPI report and I see data assets connected to a dashboard, business users can see some of the ownership and responsibilities attached to a particular dashboard or data set, and also flow that through a lineage pattern where they can check how the data flows through. And then the last part of the Azure Purview is there's a pre-built insights reporting capability as well. This is really catered to the CTOs, chief technology officers. It provides a holistic view of your data estate, gives you information around the number of data sources you have, the file structure or file types, and for example, the number of classification applied and the number of data sets that contains GDPR, the data sets as well. So it gives you a all-encompassing view across your data that's been connected with Azure Purview itself. So we'll go through more of a deep dive now around what is actually Azure Purview. So the features essentially has a data map. It provides the scanning capability across all your data sources. It can scan from on-prem, multi-cloud, and also software as a service applications. And then it stores all that information, the data and the metadata assets within that data map. Then the second part is around the data catalog. So the data catalog obviously allows you to browse the various data that you have stored in a more meaningful, powerful way. So it gives you that semantic search experience that a lot of users will like to quickly find a particular data set that they're interested in. And then the last part is around the data insight, where reports, the monitoring capabilities, and it just gives user another unique view on top of their data map itself. So under the hood, as sort of mentioned, you have Azure Purview, which provides that unique unified experience for data governance. You have the data catalog, which allows you to search, browse glossaries, and provide lineage capabilities. The data insight, which gives you the metrics across your data. So under the hood, where it's got the unified platform, that's where the data map is. That's where all the data lives, where the lineage information lives, and the classification lives. So on the right-hand side, as you can see, there's already pre-built connectors where you can connect and scan various data assets across PowerBI, SQL Server, on-prem, Azure Synapse, and numerous other data services. And you also can connect to your Office 365 Compliance Center. So if you have sensitive labeling that you've already conducted within that center, you can actually sync it and apply that sensitive label across your data as well. So underneath that, everything that the platform was built on is essentially leveraging Open API, which is the Apache ADLS 2.0. So within the UI itself, so if there are certain connectors, proprietary data that you want to connect to, for example, machine data to be able to be readable or parsable using custom code, you can leverage the Apache ADLS API and then build your own connection to that data source and provide, a data catalog and also the data lineage capabilities as well. Okay, so with that, let's just jump into Azure Purview and then have a look. Okay, so this is Azure Purview. I'm currently in the splash page, so this gives you a good interface to interact with Purview itself. So you have a knowledge center, which gives you about help information. And then these three components are the core features that we've kind of spoken about. So you have registering of your data sources and scanning them, browsing gives you that semantic search capability across your data, and also provide the capabilities around business glossaries as well. So to start, let's just go in. I pre-built a sort of a registered data set already. So you start off with obviously setting up a new collection. So collection could be domain specific or function specific or unit, really depends on how your business and organization will operate. And then you can also create multiple parents, for instance, to sort of provide that visual connection between your data sets. And then obviously underneath that is where you register your data sets for scanning. As you can see at the moment, we have connectors to Amazon, so S3 buckets, and then there's a lot of pre-built already available Azure connectors. So all the data components, data lake, SQL pool for your Synapse analytics, your managed instance, Power BI, even Oracle database as well. So there are obviously some software service, especially with SAP components already available. Once the data source is registered, you could go and conduct a scan. So this is the part where you actually, it will scan that data source and bring out all the metadata that's attached to it. So for instance, I'm going to scan it on my Azure SQL database and just connect. Successful. Continue.
John, there's a question if you could please increase the screen size a little bit, zoom in a bit.
Okay, how's that?
Yeah,
Hopefully
thank you.
Better. No problem. Okay, so as you can see, there are a couple of tables within the database itself. So I want to go down the path of scanning all the database objects and bring that into the Azure Purview. So I want to continue. So this is essentially the rule set, the classification. So we can go down the path of just using system classification rules, or we can create new system rules for our data. So for give you an example, if we go down the path of default rules, these are some of the pre-built rules you can use to classify your data. So obviously from a government, it will detect whether it's a tax file number, Australian passport number, and obviously a lot of other government information. For financial, it's obviously able to detect bank accounts and also a very swift code for obviously international accounts as well. For personalized information, you'll be able to detect your age, email address, even personal phone numbers and names, securities around common passwords as well, and IP addresses. You can also go down the path of creating a custom rule where you can create like a regex expression for string matching, for instance, and that will provide that capability. So once you go down the scan, you can schedule the scan to have a recurrence. So really depends on how frequently you think your data needs to be updated. So for us, we just need to do it once and then go down the path of scanning. The view itself comes with a map view and also a table view. So the table view obviously gives you a tabular format to look at. So by looking at that SQL database, you can see these are some of the recent scans that I did. And at the moment, we're going through a path of actually scanning again. You essentially gives you some metric around how many scans you've done, the number of scan assets, and some of the assets that's been classified as well. Okay. So this is an example of a completed scan. Okay, so once the data is scanned, then you have your data available within the glossary. So for example, I had customer data of scanning a customer table. Once it's scanned for the Azure SQL database, you can see it provides an overview of the data asset. It gives you some of the properties around that table itself. You can look at some of the schemas, and then you can see some of the classification labels that's being applied. So it's saying that this city it's a classified as well, a walled city, and then things around personal information, email, personal name, phone numbers, and etc. has been picked up. So as part of this demo, I've also connected a data factory with Azure Purview, and just prior to this demo, I did a data movement where I moved a CSV file customer data into the Azure SQL database. And with that, it gives you a lineage map, essentially. So it gives you an idea where the original data source came from, what activity was conducted, and also the target information that's available as well. And for each of this data asset itself, you can also have the capabilities to link that up with a contact person within your organization as well. So it just gives a bit more context to a lot of the users that want to learn more about that information, and they have someone to turn to or contact. And then this just gives you a hierarchy view around the data itself. Okay. The second part, as we mentioned, is around the business glossary. You can import terms where you can create a new template and import some business terms, and you can go down the path of potentially setting up a new term. So as part of the demonstration, I've set up a COVID-19 term, because obviously some of the data sets that I'm using use COVID-19. And as you can see on the right-hand side, it's draft. So this process allows the individuals to create glossary terms and send them for approval. So once it's gone through the chain and gets approved, then it's productionalized for users to actually see and use. All right. So I create a second term, which is, for instance, a country code. I can relate that to my other term as well. So as you can see, for a country, I'm related to the COVID-19 as a parent or related term itself within the business glossary. Okay. And now let's look at the insight itself. So this gives you that holistic view across what's been connected to Azure Purview. So, you know, for instance, I've got 39 data assets from my data lake. I've got 9 assets from my database. Got 1 from the various Synapse pool, and then one around the blob storage. And this gives you an overview around the file types as well. Give you more. And you can really just go down each of these components and just look at, you know, what data has been classified and scanned. Okay, so glossary, as sort of demonstrated previously, I've only had 2 terms created, but this gives you the insight to that glossary, business glossary. Okay, so this is quite important to a lot of organizations, the classification insights. So from the scans that we've conducted, there's essentially 7 unique classification found across 2 data sources, some of the files that's been classified, and 2 tables as well. So it gives you that metric, and it gives you a category of your classification. So there has been 2 sort of asset that's been classified as personal, 2 is more government, and 1 is system itself. So we can go down the path of viewing more, and then that just gives you a drill down. So if you want to see which data set has been classified as personal name, you can see that it's from Azure SQL database itself. Okay. So this, at the moment, I wasn't able to demonstrate because this carries through your Microsoft 365 Compliance Center. So the idea is if you have an E5 license within your organization and you have sensitive labels created, you can link that up and that will automatically trigger through and sync with Azure Purview. And then you can sort of see all the metrics within here as well. And then the last part is around file extensions. So it just gives you an overview around the different types of files that you have within your data state. So CSV, zip files, text files. So more or less the unstructured, semi-structured data sets that you might have available to you that's been scanned. Yep. Okay. So and the last part is around obviously the management or account information. So this kind of determines of all the various scan rules, metrics, insights, some of the classification rules that you've been created. So these are all the default classification rules. I think this is, yeah, this gives you that as well. And these are some of the external connectors that's currently available for data lineage. So there will be more to come within the next few months. Just wait for announcements. But so far at the moment, you can leverage Data Factory and Azure Data Share to see, you know, from a data movement perspective and also high-level transformation. And then the last part is around the security access control planes. You can control who can see what within Azure Purview as part of that. Okay, so that's for a quick demo for Azure Purview. We'll jump back into the slide. And maybe what we'll do is we'll talk about the Power BI component. So I think Power BI is a common tool to a lot of users out there at the moment. I just want to sort of touch up on top of the architecture itself. So from a Power BI standpoint, you essentially have a desktop client where users will use and download to author various reports for visualization. From that desktop version, you'll be able to connect to hundreds of various data sources and then build your reports, dashboards, and then once it's ready, you can publish it to a Power BI service, which is on the cloud. And then once it's available on the Power BI service, it enables you to collaborate and share within your organization or users from outside of your organization. If you need to access data sources that's not on the cloud or external data sources that's within your organization, then essentially you will need to use a Power BI data gateway to provide and broker that connection between the Power BI service and your on-prem environment itself. Okay, and let's have a look at Power BI. So this is the Synapse workspace that we worked through in part 1 as part of the ingestion framework demonstration. As you can see, within the develop frame, you can actually link a Power BI workspace into your Synapse analytics. So, and then that will display all your published Power BI datasets to that workspace and then various reports. So using the data that we've kind of ingested from last week's session, just kind of created a couple of visuals, which we'll go through in a live demo now. And it's more of a generic sort of practice around the creation of the report itself. If you are already familiar with Power BI, you'll probably know everything that I'll be doing anyway. So, okay. Let's go to the desktop. So to create the report. Okay, so this is Power BI desktop. It's at the right-hand side, you can see some of the visualizations that you can use. And at the top, you have your main controls where you have home, insert, modeling, and view. So the first thing you want to do is obviously connect to a data source. So for us, we'll be connecting to our Synapse SQL pool to pull in some of the COVID data in. Okay, this just gives you an overview of all the various data sources you can connect to using Power BI. It's literally hundreds, over 100 different connectors that's already pre-built and made available to you. So just giving you an overview. Numerous file base, various on-prem database connectors as well. Power Platform, so users that are familiar with the Power Platform offerings, Power Apps, for instance. And then for us, it's the Azure component. So we'll connect to Azure Synapse. Just get that data source. And the connectivity mode, there's two, import or direct query. Import mode is essentially you're importing all the connected data into Power BI, whereas direct query, when you create a report and you're actually interacting with that report, any changes you make, it actually changes and fetches it from the source. So it really depends on the mode you want it to work within. So this is the navigation panel that comes up and just gives you an idea of all the data sources that you have. So we just want to probably bring in 4 of these tables itself. You can load it straight into the data model within Power BI, or you can go down the path of doing an initial transformation if you need to cleanse your data, for instance. So within the Power Query editor, this is the transform function within Power BI. You can go down the path of changing the data types for the columns. You have all your steps that you've conducted. You can go back and forwards. In the home panels, you can obviously, remove columns, remove rows. You can merge tables, for instance. And then from a transform perspective, you can do pivots, unpivots, just a lot of sort of generic transformation capabilities. So for us, our data has already been, it's within Synapse, so it's already been cleansed and transformed, so we can load that in straight to the model. Just give it a few seconds while it's connecting to the Power BI desktop model. Let's load the data in. It also detects various relationships that you already have in your source system as well. So on the right, we've got the various tables already loaded. And on the panel here, you can see this is where we build our visualization or reports or dashboards. This you can actually check the data model or the data tables underneath that. And then you can also see the relationship that exists between various data sets that you've loaded in. Okay, so let's start creating some visuals. Maybe let's put in a background image. Okay, and let's bring in a card to see some metrics. So what I'm going to do first is want to see the total number of countries which I have the data across. So it's bringing up the first country region, but what we want to do is having a distinct count of all the countries that's available in the data set. Yeah. So from that table, we have 185 different countries that we want to report against. Countries. Okay. And then let's look at the number of confirmed cases up to date. So 116 million. Confirmed cases. Okay, and maybe let's look at the number of recovered. Okay. 66 million has been recovered from the original confirmed cases. Okay, and maybe now we want to do is create a measure, which is essentially a calculation, and just want to see the percentages between the number of people that's recovered. So you can go down the path of doing a quick measure or a new measure where you need to write a DAX formula. We'll just do quick measure. So that gives you the various calculations you want to use across your data. You can see you can do filters, time intelligence, running totals. For us, we just want to do a simple division. And what we want to do is looking at recovered divided by confirmed. And that quick measure converted to the DAX language where instead of writing a code, it'll convert that straight away for you. So let's just rename it to something meaningful. And let's see it on a card. Let's round it up to a percentage. Just got to convert this to a percentage. Okay. 56% has recovered. And maybe let's just change the color of the label so it looks a bit different. Okay. Now maybe if we want to look at the total number of deaths, which stands around 3 million. And let's create a measure to work out that calculation as well. Okay. So you can see the measure's been created there. It's around 20%. Okay, let's change that to a red label as well. Okay. Now, if I want to go down path of maybe looking at, I suppose, recovered by country, let's bring that cluster bar chart. Drag here. Country. Recovered, yep. That's one. Okay, as you can see, India is top at the moment. We can also put some data labels on there too. So each column can have the metrics applied. And maybe we'll look at the death by country as well. So just copy and paste, and then essentially changing the recovered, just use death and drag and drop. So that gives us some metrics. So you can see the US is #1 at the moment. for death by country. Okay. So go some visuals, and maybe I want to create a heat map across using a geography map. So these are the default visuals that's available in Power BI, but you can always get more. So you can go into the marketplace and then download various visuals that you want to use to represent your data. It's a bit slow today. Okay, here we go. So this is the app source, Power BI, where you have various different analytic visuals that you can use. And for us, we wanted to get the heat map. Yeah, add. And it's imported here. So let's drag that in. And we want to look at country. And then we want to probably see the heat map of death across the various our regions. Okay. See the dent density? Yep. Change it to a more red color. Okay, and that just gives you a quick insight around some of the dense areas for the country that's being impacted with the COVID. You can kind of zoom in as well. Okay. So previously I had a background, and here you go. Just probably looks a bit better. Okay. So now we essentially got the visuals created. Let's publish it and then see how that appears within our Synapse Analytics. So to publish, there's a publish button on the home. First, we've got to save the Power BI file. So the workspace I've linked it to is our APAC capabilities data AI workspace. And now that's just pushing the visualization, the report, the data sets that I've imported into the Power BI service within the cloud itself. And that's success. So if we go back to our Synapse, let's refresh the workspace. Here we go. We've got the AzureDIY report that was just published. Yeah. So that's the reports that you want to see, the one we just created. So some of the features that's available within the Power BI services of the powerful ones around ask your question. So this is pretty much AI within the Power BI where you can where users can log in and just ask questions about the data itself. So let's say largest recovery debt, largest death percentage, for instance. It will tell you, in terms of that. And there's a lot of pre-built, question answers that's mainly really available for you as well. So it's a good way to sort of find insight from the data that's available there. Okay. And I think that's pretty much it for this demonstration. And I'll just wrap it up by doing a bit of selling. So obviously inside we have a Power BI Foundation offer. So the idea is to provide development guidelines around how to use Power BI within the organizations. So some of the report design principles, development, the workflows. We'll set up a governance document where we provide recommendation around how to administer Power BI within the organization, how to fit within your operation policies and security and licensing. And then essentially we'll be able to provide a monitoring solution around usage patterns within your organizations. So it just gives the administrators a bit more easier to actually manage Power BI within the organization and just seeing which reports are being used, which ones are idle, and it gives that kind of information. So with that, any questions? So look.
We actually don't have, we have managed to answer all questions in the chat, which is great. But if there's any more questions, please feel free to drop them in here now. And maybe as you guys think about your questions, Chuang, what are some of the most common scenarios that you run into as you work with customers related to this specific topic?
Just essentially, a lot of it's around governance. How to, correctly set up Power BI within an organization, how to use security and essentially control who can see what, how to share different reports to different end users, and then leveraging capabilities around Power BI to external users. And I think a lot of common questions around Power BI is around licensing, because obviously there's so many different types of Power BI services. You have the normal Power BI Pro individual license, you have Power BI Premium, which is suited to enterprises. And now Power BI has even got embedded for a lot of app dev capabilities where you can embed Power BI within your applications. And now there's a new feature where you can do per licensing on Power BI Premium. So have an individual license for a user to use Power BI Premium capabilities as well. So these are kind of the common questions that,
Yeah.
Talking about, sorry, Vera. Talking about that, we have got another licensing question actually on the chat that has come in. So can Power BI report be shared to one second. Let me read it out actually for you. Can Power BI report be shared to public or only to Power BI license holders?
Yeah, so if you want to share if you have a Power BI Pro, then yes, the other users will need to have a licensing as well.
Vera, would you like to add something from your side?
Yes, of course. So when you share a dashboard, those that are accessing that shared dashboard will need to have a Power BI Pro license. If you are looking to share it with over, say, 500 people, you could look at Power BI Premium, which is dedicated capacity. And that would be the advice that we would provide.
Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. So we have got one more question that has come from Toby. Do you recommend using service accounts for running Power BI jobs? Do you restrict access at the database layer, or do you implement AD groups to control the application Power BI access?
Yeah, so that really comes down to whether you use import or direct query. Because if you're, first of all, first question is around service account. Yes, definitely. You'll set up a service account for users to use that service account to author the various reports and publish against that report. And then if you use, say, import mode, then essentially you'll have all your data that's connected and published to the Power BI service. And then within Power BI service, which is on the cloud, you will use AD groups to actually control and administer who can see the report, who can see that, have access to that workspace, and that's definitely governed by AD groups. And if you even want to go down the path of, say, where two users look at the same report, but they only want to see their data relevant to them, then you have to actually go down the path of implementing rollover security across your data. So if it's import mode, then you need to do that on the Power BI dataset. If you're looking at direct query, then that will need to be implemented on the source, because Power BI is providing that brokerage to connect to the source and render reports based on what data you have access to.
Awesome, thank you. If I don't have any more questions that has come in, maybe we'll give it another minute. Or anyone on the call has any question or anything wants to add something?
More licensing questions?
Yeah. We need Vera back to answer the licensing questions. I think we'll skip it for this time. But thank you all for joining. Chuang, if you don't mind going back to going to the next slide.
Yeah, sure.
Yep, please provide your feedback. We really take your feedback with the most importance, and we want to make sure all our sessions are aligned to the feedback that you provide, and we give you the best sessions possible for Azure DIY. So make sure you're part of the feedback, and also, as we mentioned, join our LinkedIn group as well. While talking about that, we have 2 more questions actually. Maybe we'll take those questions because we have some more time. Is there a use case for migrating from MicroStrategy to Power BI, and how?
I can't comment because I'm not familiar with MicroStrategy, but I think I can talk from a generic term. If your sort of organization is using Office 365, then and Power BI has obviously integrations with a lot of these Azure components, with a lot of the Microsoft stack, it just makes sense because you can run your governance across reporting capabilities. But yeah, just for that specific question, I'm not familiar with MicroStrategy. Apologies.
Cool. Feel free to reach out to us separately as well, and we can find the answers for you or catch up with you separately. There is another interesting question that has come in on the chat. Is there a way to publish a read-only report like using JSON or to create a HTML version of the Power BI?
Yes, you can. When you create a report in Power BI, you can actually have an embed link. So you can actually embed that report into a HTTP website. A lot of users, customers do it for SharePoint, for instance. But with that, the users that interact with it might need a license. The alternative path is you can still leverage Power BI, but then you got to go down the path of using Power BI embedded. So having Power BI embedded, it's essentially you have to create embedded in Azure, and then within Power BI you can pretty much configure your reports and data sets onto that embedded node, which is essentially a dedicated node itself, and then you can embed the report dashboards in any apps, HTML, anything that you want, and users will not need to have a license to view it.
Okay, we'll take one last question before we sign up. There's a question around the CI/CD for Power BI. Is there a way to do a CI/CD for Power BI? If so, how?
Yeah, there is a way. There is a way where you could use Azure DevOps from a repository standpoint to version control your PBIX file, which is your Power BI reports files, and then to publish to obviously to sort of manage the CI/CD, you have to use or leverage Power BI REST APIs. So there are sort of content. If you reach out to me, and I can probably provide some link or information around how to do that.
Awesome. Thank you for that, and that's all with the questions for today. Please join our LinkedIn community as well. And again, we'll see you next week, same time, with another amazing topic. Till then, good luck and good health, and talk soon. Bye.
See you.